Hello and welcome back to another rip-roaring episode of Jefferson's Salute to the Presidents. I'm Thomas Watson, and this is my sidekick and bobblehead, Thomas Jefferson. On this episode, you'll be treated to the life story about our 12th president, old rough and ready himself, Zachary Taylor. So without further delay, and if you have the courage, grab a bowl of fresh cherries and ice cold milk and enjoy the show. I'm standing at the entrance to the Montebello Plantation, which was located near Barbersville, roughly 16 miles northeast of Charlottesville, Virginia. While this was a private residence, I knew I had to get closer to see the house, and that's exactly what happened. It's believed Richard and Sally Taylor stopped here while traveling from their Hare Forest plantation to their new residence near Louisville when Zachary was born. Zachary Taylor was born in a log outbuilding at Montebello on November 24, 1784. But over the years, the birth cabin had been demolished and the precise location is unknown. When the Taylors arrived in the Louisville area in the spring of 1785, they lived in a cabin on the 400 acres of property Richard Taylor had purchased. During the period when young Zachary lived at this site here, his dad and enslaved people constructed a two-story brick home nearby Richard called Springfield. This modern home on Daleview Lane was constructed on the site of the Taylor's original cabin and is now located just 2 blocks north of Springfield. The two-story brick home behind me is Springfield, which was constructed in 1790. Today it's a private residence, but during my visit on May 10, 2022, I was carried into the front yard of the home where I posed for photos. I learned from a passerby that the street side of this historic home, where I'm posing here, was considered the back. During his childhood, Zachary's mother Sally taught her son how to read and write. The future president had also received some formal education as well, for it was said the lad was patient and a quick learner. It was also recorded that young Zachary wasn't good at spelling, his grammar was horrible, and his handwriting was even worse. In other words, Taylor wasn't all that swift, which was likely the case for a lot of youngsters living in the wild frontier. Even though this home was a private residence, I was carried through a small garden to the front of the historic house where I posed for this image. Before he began his military career in 1808, Zachary Taylor lived in this home for 13 years. On June 18, 1810, Zachary married Margaret Peggy Smith in Springfield, and 5 of their 6 children were born here as well. Lieutenant Zachary Taylor was 25 years old when he married 21-year-old Margaret Peggy Smith on June 21, 1810, in the Springfield home. Zachary Taylor was a 40-year career military officer, rising from first lieutenant to major general from 1808 to 1848. Taylor served in the War of 1812, the Black Hawk War, the Second Seminole War, and the Mexican-American War. As the hero of the Mexican-American War, Old Rough and Ready became the Whig Party's presidential nominee during the 1848 election, which was the first time voting took place nationwide on the same day. When the votes were counted, Zachary Taylor had 163 electoral votes, Lewis Cass finished with 127, and poor Martin Van Buren ended up with 0. On Monday, March 5, 1849, Zachary Taylor stood in the snow flurries on the east portico of the United States Capitol where he recited the presidential oath of office. Inauguration of Zachary Taylor, March 5, 1849. In the summer of 1849, President Taylor embarked on a tour of states in the northeastern part of the country. That journey was cut short as the president was ill with gastrointestinal issues during most of the trip. As a woman of frontier life, Peggy Taylor had no desire to fulfill the usual duties of First Lady and stayed secluded on the second floor of the executive mansion. Peggy did, however, handle the private aspects in the mansion and kept her slaves concealed within the mansion as to not draw attention to the controversial subject, slavery. First Lady Peggy Taylor. Although a slaveholder himself, President Taylor opposed the extension of slavery in the United States and steadfastly denied any state's right to secession over the issue. And while he favored California's admission to the Union as a free state, Taylor was totally against what became known as the Compromise of 1850 and did his best to reject slavery measures favorable to the South. Hostess Mary Betty Bliss. On July 4, 1850, President Taylor sat in the hot sun during the dedication ceremony for the Washington Monument, which was attended by the adopted son of George Washington. After being exposed to the rays of the torrid sun, President Taylor returned to the executive mansion where he wolfed down a large bowl of ripe cherries and drank a pitcher of ice-cold milk. Later that day, the president developed severe cramps, which were quickly diagnosed by his doctor as cholera morbus. Poor sanitation in Washington made it risky for anyone to eat raw fruit or dairy products during the hot summer. During the next few days, President Taylor grew weaker from diarrhea and vomiting, and he was convinced he would never recover. And even though Zachary Taylor was never considered a genius, this time he was right. On the evening of July 9th, as he laid in bed, President Taylor said, "I am about to die. I expect the summons very soon. I have tried to discharge my duties faithfully. I regret nothing, but I am sorry that I am about to leave my friends." Those were his last words. At 10:35 p.m. on July 9, 1850, Zachary Taylor became the second president to die in office. The distraught First Lady refused to permit the mortician to embalm her husband's body, nor did she allow a death mask to be taken. President Taylor laid in state in the East Room of the Executive Mansion until July 13th when an Episcopal funeral service was conducted. Following the service, Taylor's lead and mahogany coffin was transported from the mansion to Congressional Cemetery in Washington. The casket containing the remains of President Taylor arrived at Congressional Cemetery in Washington on July 13, 1850, where it was placed in the public receiving vault. The president's remains were entombed in this public receiving vault behind me, where they remained for 105 days. Finally, on October 25, 1850, the coffin containing the remains of the president left this vault and was transported to the Taylor family plot at the Springfield Plantation in Louisville. After the casket traveled by train to Pittsburgh and then by barge along the Ohio River to Louisville, the president's remains were placed in this family tomb on November 1st, 1850. Shortly after First Lady Peggy Taylor died on August 14th, 1852, her body was placed alongside her husband in this unassuming tomb on the Taylor Springfield plantation. In the 1920s, the Taylor family initiated an effort to turn the family burial ground into a national cemetery. Their efforts worked. In 1926, a total of 16 acres became the Zachary Taylor National Cemetery. After this new mausoleum was constructed near the original tomb, the remains of Zachary and Peggy Taylor were moved to their final resting place on May 6, 1926. As I looked through this rear window, I saw the two sarcophagi which contained the caskets of Zachary Taylor and his wife Peggy. President Zachary Taylor's final resting place is the sarcophagus on the left side of this image. What was this Zachary Taylor's final resting place? On June 17, 1991, the doors behind me were opened and President Taylor's coffin was removed. The Kentucky medical examiner tested samples of the president's hair, fingernails, and other tissues to determine whether or not Taylor was poisoned in 1850. When no evidence of foul play was found, President Taylor was reunited with his wife. The statue behind me, located in the Zachary Taylor National Cemetery, is a life-size depiction of Taylor in military attire, crowning a 50-foot tall granite shaft. Erected by the state of Kentucky in 1883, this monument features the statue facing south near his original burial plot and the later 1926 limestone mausoleum. Well, that's it for another episode of Jefferson's Salute to the Presidents. Did you enjoy your cherries? I hear they're to die for. Before you go, please subscribe to this channel, hit that like button, and please leave us a comment. It'll help our audience grow. Our next show will feature the life of our 13th president, Millard Fillmore. Please stay safe, and we'll see you soon.